Washington, D.C., July 26, 2023. The subcommittee hearing, an unidentified anomalous phenomena or WAPS, will come to order. On Capitol Hill, the House Oversight Committee assembles for a landmark congressional hearing to record first-hand accounts of UAP activity. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated. They are routine during the proceedings. Lawmakers listened to testimony from three notable whistleblowers: retired Navy pilots Ryan Graves and A. David Fravor, and former Air Force Intelligence Officer David Grush, who also served on the UAP task force. The military veterans have come forward to testify, under oath, about WAPs that they claim the government has been covering up. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on. Excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Millions of people are watching it, and they're hearing this. Beyond dramatic testimony that, for the first time, we're told what everybody knows to be true. The US government has been hiding secrets about UFOs for over 70 years. Whistleblower David Grush even suggests that the government may be in possession of alien technology. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program for UFO researchers and lawmakers alike. The hearing marks a watershed moment. As many believe, the Pentagon has been overly secretive about unidentified aerial phenomenon. To have a UAP hearing from the House Oversight Committee was a first for the history books. There was a lot of information that was shared and alleged in that hearing, which made it one of the most, I think, important hearings in the Oversight Committee's history. The hearings' explosive testimony made headlines across the world, and like many government whistleblowers, the individuals who sent before the committee came forward at great personal risk. From the lay person's perspective of what a whistleblower is, it is a person who has got inside information about wrongdoing, who comes forward and at their own peril reveals this to investigative reporters or to government officials. I had asked about 12 people to testify, and we got down to those 3 because the others had. I think they've been threatened or warned not to come on, and some of them told us that. In fact, if you're gonna be a whistleblower, you gotta know that whatever deep, dark secret exists in your life, it's gonna come out. These guys know that. When they come forward with something as sensitive as this, they're gonna pay a price. Is the government actively discouraging people from speaking out about UFOs? According to military insiders, the answer is a resounding yes. But the willingness of whistleblowers to come forward, despite the risk, has led to more open discussion about the UFO phenomenon than ever before. And the man who is most credited with sparking interest among lawmakers on Capitol Hill is whistleblower Luis Elizondo. Luis Elizondo was a full-time military career guy, United States Army, and a very high-ranking counterintelligence officer. He was retained in 2007 to a top-secret program, which is the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program, to investigate a UFO phenomenon. He became involved in setting up some other special, kind of less formal program inside the Pentagon that was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. For almost a decade, Elizondo studied UFOs and interviewed eyewitnesses for the Army. But according to Elizondo, the more he uncovered, the more his investigation was suppressed. They were making some progress in the military, in the Pentagon, but he's trying to get the attention of his higher UPS. Hey, look, these cases are really important. These encounters are dramatic and unexplained. We need to put some resources into studying this. And he got nowhere. He kept getting blocked. So he took a pretty courageous stance and resigned. In October 2017, Lou Elizondo resigned from a tip after Pentagon officials refused to present his findings. To Defense Secretary James Mattis. I've seen too much, I've talked to many people. I've too many reports, I know it's real. I can't even conscious. Just keep my head buried in the sand. I had to leave the very job that I love. To get my point across. He gets frustrated. And he decides to do something about it. He becomes a whistleblower. Not just a whistleblower, but perhaps the whistleblower of all time. Just days after resigning, Elizondo shared his story with reporters from the New York Times. And on December 16th, the paper published a front-page article that revealed the classified UFO program in many ways. That New York Times story really changed ufology. It around the world. Because when the New York Times got on board saying, yeah, there are UFOs out there, that opened a lot of people's eyes. Along with the article, the New York Times released 3 UFO videos taken by Navy pilots, including the now famous TikTok encounter. These videos captured the world's attention. And suddenly it's like we're in a new world. We have these incredible videos shot by Navy pilots, giving irrefutable evidence that there is a technology out there that is beyond anything our near peers have. Lou Elizondo was the core. I mean, without him as the whistleblower, as the main impetus for it, that story would never have happened. The videos, though, is what galvanized public attention. Almost immediately after Elizondo went public, elements within the government actively sought to discredit him. Lou Alexander went through a tremendous amount of harassment from senior Pentagon officials, former supervisors of his, and you had a statement in 2019 that came from the Pentagon spokesperson, who stated that Louis Elizondo had no official office. With this office at a tip in advance Aerospace Threat Identification Program, Lou Alexander knew he'd pay a price. But it was almost a medium depending on undercut his credibility. But he is a courageous individual. And he stuck to his guns and he changed the world. From Lou Elizondo's 2017 ATIP revelations to the 2023 congressional UAP hearing, whistleblowers today are making their voices heard like never before. But they are just the latest in a long line of whistleblowers who've been coming forward to tell their stories for decades, and the most controversial of their claims, that the US military is in possession of alien technology, can be traced all the way back to 1947, and an Army Air Force major who is at the heart of the Roswell incident. Roswell, New Mexico, July 1947. An unidentified object is witnessed streaking across the night sky, then crashes in the desert north of town, near the Roswell Army Airfield. Rentier Mac Brazel hears the impact and investigates the next morning. Mac Brazel is the first to find the debris field. And it's an impressive debris field, pieces of objects and things everywhere. And Brazel reports it to the local Roswell sheriff, man named George Wilcox. And Wilcox sends some deputies out there. And the case just gets crazier from there. Roswell Army Airfield sends people out to investigate it. The next thing you know, the press release goes out. Army captures flying disc. Shortly after, the US Air Force said, we've recovered a flying disc. They reversed their position and said it was just a weather balloon. The Roswell incident has become the most notorious alleged cover-up of a UFO crash and retrieval in US history. And at the center of it all is whistleblower Jesse Marcel. My grandfather, Major Jesse Marcel, back in July of 1947, was the head of intelligence for the 509th Bombing Group that was heavily involved in our atomic program to end the Second World War, and pretty well versed in the latest technologies, aircraft, what have you. At the time, Major Jesse Marcel was the lead investigator into what has become known as the Roswell incident. On July 7th, Major Marcel was dispatched from Roswell Army Airfield to examine the mysterious debris. According to his grandson, Marcel was so astounded by what he saw that he took the debris home with him. He went and woke up his son, my father, who's about 12 years old the time, and his wife Leo, and said, "You guys gotta come take a look at this." He couldn't make heads or tails, or any sense out of what he was looking at. Even stranger, while examining the wreckage, Marcel's family discovered several mysterious markings. One thing they noticed is it almost had no weight to it. And my father picked up what was a beam about 11-12 inches long. And all of a sudden these symbols appeared. And he really came to the idea that whatever this was, it was not made by human hands. The next morning Major Marcel was summoned to the Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas. There he was given strict orders not to reveal the truth about the Roswell crash, and for 3 decades he didn't. But in February of 1978, Marcel finally broke his silence. My grandfather was a ham radio operator. Loved to talk. He was talking on ham radio, and somebody recognized his name as being part of the airbase. And he talked a little bit about Roswell. And soon enough a gentleman of, "My name is Stanton Friedman," heard of it and interviewed my grandfather about it. And that was really when it broke up. Stanton Friedman was an American Canadian nuclear physicist who began scientifically investigating UFOs in the 1960s due to his curiosity about what happened at Roswell. When he learned that Jesse Marcel was ready to reveal the truth, he went to visit him at his home in southern Louisiana. Major Marcel told me I was worse to talk to him, that what they were trying to keep under wrap was actual wreckage of a flying saucer. The General Roger Ramey, head of the 8th Air Force, covered up very straightforwardly. Roger Ramey came to Razzle and said, "Bring all the UFO material to Fort Worth, 8th Air Force headquarters, and we'll disclose the truth." But Major Jesse Marcel goes to Fort Worth, and they bring out a weather balloon, and they make Jesse Marcel, a radar-trained intelligence officer, stand in front of a weather balloon and admit that he was confused. Everybody was familiar with weather balloons. The notion that Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer for the 509, couldn't recognize a weather balloon is ridiculous. According to Friedman, in order to ensure that the truth about Roswell remained hidden from the public, the military not only had to stage the famous weather balloon photo, but also make sure that Marcel and others who knew the real story told the line, "You agree that you will not reveal anything you've learned that was classified to anybody, without a need to know, an appropriate security clearance." And darn few people who, after the warrant, suddenly broke their security house. My grandfather broke his body secrecy. I think that in some small part, he was looking for a little bit of, like, "Hey, you guys, there's something to this." Despite his excitement over what he had found in the debris field, Marcel maintained his silence until he was 70 years old. People who are involved in keeping secrets, it poisons you, and you feel this great release when you finally get it out and say, "Yeah, it's all true." I've spoken to military witnesses who sat on stories for 50 years, out of loyalty, out of a belief that the law constrained them. But Marcel, 30 years on, he was like, "Okay, that's enough of the Calver story. Here's what really happened." After Marcel broke his silence in 1978, it caused a sensation, and Friedman began referring to the Roswell cover-up as a cosmic Watergate. Before 1978, the Roswell crash was pretty much unheard of. Only in the hardcore groups of UFO people would you know about Roswell. Jesse Marcel blew open the door to the most famous UFO crash story that you can think of today. Could it be that Jesse Marcel is just one of dozens, or perhaps even hundreds of military personnel who have witnessed unexplainable events that they are forbidden to reveal? UFO researchers suggest the Roswell incident was the beginning of a decades-long government cover-up, one that involved an elaborate disinformation campaign disguised as an official UFO investigation called Project Blue Book. The famous Roswell incident was just one of many high-profile encounters with unidentified flying objects, that occurred during the late 1940s. In June 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 silver disc-shaped objects flying near Mount Rainier. Less than 1 month later, sailor Harold Dahl reported that a flying disc dropped molten slide onto his boat near Maury Island, Washington. And in January 1948, Army Captain Thomas Mantle tragically died in a plane crash while chasing a UFO over western Ohio. These and other similar events prompted the government to launch Project Blue Book. In 1952, Project Blue Book was the USA Force research and investigation program into UFOs. This was a project that took some years, but by the mid-60s there's 20,000 cases there. So, this was one of the most significant investigations of UFOs of its time. Project Blue Book would last 18 years and involved dozens of investigators. Chief among them were Air Force Captain Edward J. Rubel, astronomer Jacques Vallée, and Project Blue Book scientific advisor Dr. J. Allen Hynek. According to Dr. Hynek's son Paul, the Air Force made its agenda clear right from the start. The Air Force came calling to my father in the late 40s, asking him to tap down reports of flying saucers. My father is very useful to Project Blue Book because he had the academic credibility to get people to believe what he's saying. J. Allen Hynek was an astronomy professor, brought on by the USA Air Force. And to start off with, he absolutely took the party line. But while the purpose of Project Blue Book was to discredit UFOs over the course of his tenure, Hynek wrote a question the project's mission. My father was muzzled by the Air Force in terms of what they would investigate, how serious they would investigate it, and what he was allowed to disclose. He had a front row center seat to the most confidential aspects of the early days of the UFO phenomena, and my father went from a die-hard skeptic to an acceptor of the accumulated weight of the data. Hynek's findings were dismissed by his superiors, who demanded that he continue to debunk UFO reports. And when Project Blue Book ended in 1969, Hynek went public. He was really the main person to draw attention to the fact that Project Blue Book was not set out to find the truth, but to control the narrative. J. Allen Hynek was one of the most outspoken voices about the government efforts to suppress evidence of UFOs, and some researchers believe he would have spoken out sooner if it wasn't for a tragic event that happened to one of his colleagues, Air Force Captain Edward Ruppelt. Edward Ruppelt was the first director of Project Blue Book. During his tenure, which lasted close to 2 years, Ruppelt was in charge of all of the best information that the United States Air Force was acquiring at that time about, as he began calling them UFOs. And Ruppelt actually gave us that term, unidentified flying object. Project Blue Book was ostensibly a military project to debunk UFOs, but Rupert wasn't going along with that. Rupert was saying, "Oh no, there's something going on here, we need a look at this." Captain Rupert frequently found himself at odds with his superiors, like when he tried to investigate a major UFO incident that occurred right over the nation's capital. On Saturday, July 19, 1952, at 11:40 p.m., air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base detected 7 unidentified flying objects on their radar screens. UFO sightings caused a sensation, and incredibly, more unidentified objects were detected again. The following weekend, for 2 weeks, Washington, D.C. is buzzed by a fleet of 7 UFOs. They literally fly over the White House, over the capital, Washington National Airport. Ruppelt was in Washington while this is happening. He wanted to investigate, and his frustration begins because he's told he can't have a staff car, because he's not a general. If he wants to investigate it, go get himself a taxi. Frustrated by what he saw as a government effort to debunk all UFOs. In 1953, Rupert resigned from Project Blue Book and a few years later he made his findings public. In 1956, Ruppelt publishes a book about his experience as the director of Project Blue Book, the Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. This book is incredibly important because this is the first time that the public gets a glimpse of the inner workings of the government's investigations into UFOs from an insider. One of the things Ruppelt pointed out in his book that was really interesting and important was to show that within the military, particularly the Air Force, many of them took UFOs quite seriously and believed that this was interplanetary. That was the word they were using back then. Ruppelt's book captivated readers across the country. Its popularity led to an updated version being published 4 years later. But curiously, in the new printing, Ruppelt completely reversed his position on the UFO phenomenon. In 1960, Ruppelt had a second edition of his book, and he said that UFOs were a hoax, that they did not exist. The strange thing is that he dies within months of the release of the book. He's a 37-year-old man who dies of a heart attack. And now on top of this, the UFO community is wondering what happened to him. Is there a conspiracy here? It is still one of the most enduring mysteries of when a UFO investigator essentially left us before their time. Is it possible that Captain Edward Ruppelt paid the ultimate price for exposing a government cover-up regarding UFOs? Perhaps further clues can be found in the statements of another whistleblower who claimed to have reverse-engineered an alien spacecraft throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Dozens of whistleblowers came forward with incredible claims about the government's knowledge of extraterrestrial visitation. But for many UFO researchers, the most important revelations of all came in the late 1980s from a physicist named Bob Lazar. The first person Lazar told his story to was his close friend, retired CIA pilot John Lear. Bibles are used to work at Los Angeles, had the highest clearance that you can get there, and he worked for 2 or 4 months up there, at Area 51. While working at the top secret Air Force facility, known as Area 51, Lazar revealed to his friend that a remarkable object was hidden deep within the secret military compound. Was December 6th of '88. He comes in. He sits down there at my desk and he said, "I saw a disc today," and I said, "What?" He said, "I saw a disc." And I said, "You saw a flying Dodger?" He said, "Yeah. Sure did, but I saw him." That was really interesting and important, was to show that within the military, particularly the Air Force, many of them took UFOs quite seriously and believed that this was interplanetary. That was the word they were using back then. Ruppelt's book captivated readers across the country. Its popularity led to an updated version being published 4 years later. But curiously, in the new printing, Ruppelt completely reversed his position on the UFO phenomenon. In 1960, Ruppelt had a second edition of his book, and he said that UFOs were a hoax, that they did not exist. The strange thing is that he dies within months of the release of the book. He's a 37-year-old man who dies of a heart attack. And now on top of this, the UFO community is wondering what happened to him. Is there a conspiracy here? It is still one of the most enduring mysteries of when a UFO investigator essentially left us before their time. Is it possible that Captain Edward Ruppelt paid the ultimate price for exposing a government cover-up regarding UFOs? Perhaps further clues can be found in the statements of another whistleblower who claimed to have reverse-engineered an alien spacecraft throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Dozens of whistleblowers came forward with incredible claims about the government's knowledge of extraterrestrial visitation. But for many UFO researchers, the most important revelations of all came in the late 1980s from a physicist named Bob Lazar. The first person Lazar told his story to was his close friend, retired CIA pilot John Lear. Bibles are used to work at Los Angeles. Had the highest clearance that you can get there. And he worked for 2 or 4 months up there. At Area 51. While working at the top secret Air Force facility, known as Area 51, Lazar revealed to his friend that a remarkable object was hidden deep within the secret military compound. Was December 6th of 88. He comes in. He sits down there at my desk and he said, "I saw a disc today," and I said, "What?" He said, "I saw a disc." And I said, "You saw a flying Dodger?" He said, "Yeah. Sure did, but I saw him." We're visited the very next day by people purporting to be government agents who told them to shut the hell up or else. And in a couple of cases, they were threatened with death. Faced with constant harassment, Lazar retreated from public view. Then in 2013, 24 years after Bob Lazar's explosive interview, a Freedom of Information Act request forced the government to finally reveal the existence of Area 51, while Air Force officials still denied that the facility had anything to do with extraterrestrial craft or beings. Lazar felt a sense of vindication. In 2018, he decided to share his story in filmmaker Jeremy Corbell's documentary titled Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. In the late 1980s, the US government had recovered alien spacecraft, several of them, and the technology in the Nevada desert that they were keeping quiet and analyzing. That's a fact. I think after he saw some time passing and saw how people were saying things that he never said, just finally got him, and he's a fighter. So I think he just got to a point where he was saying, "Okay, enough is enough. Here we go. What do you want to know? I don't like being in the public eye. I don't got money for doing this. And quite frankly, I can make up a better lie. But I have no motivation to lie." Jeremy's film was an atomic bomb all over again. A whole new generation of people got to learn about Bomb Bazaar. And I think it inspired some of the people who are now coming forward as whistleblowers, who go ahead and have the courage to speak up. Could it be that Bob Lazar was targeted by a campaign to suppress the truth about alien technology at Area 51? Many believe Bazar's willingness to come forward opened the door for another whistleblower, one who exposed a conspiracy so vast it would take him into the halls of the United States Congress. June 5, 2023. The Debrief, a science news website, publishes a sensational interview with military intelligence officer David Grush. David Grush. He's a former intelligence community officer. He served on the UAP task force under the directorship of J. Stratton, and he was a representative of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. While I was on the UAP task force, Dave Grush was given the job to go and start interviewing people who worked on a previous UFO program, see what they were willing to tell us, and he found a lot of things. In the Debrief article, Grush revealed that as part of his official duties at the Pentagon, he was informed of a decades-long, top-secret military program to recover and reverse engineer crashed craft of non-human origin. Was his job to go and interview some of the people in the system who are actively responsible for keeping it secret. And he says it's all real. Everything you've heard, everything you've been told, all the rumors about crashed UFOs, dead bodies, it's all true. Grush interviewed, he said, about 40 witnesses within the national security establishment. He stated that there are multiple alien craft that the United States government or its licensed private contractors have possession of, and he stated that there are what he called biologics that were recovered. That's his word for alien bodies. I've been in the secure environment with Dave and had been briefed on everything that he's uncovered, and everything that he's saying in public has been approved by the Defense Department and also by the Inspector General. There's a there as the saying goes, and we would all be wise to listen to the stories. Astonished by the scope of the project, Grush came forward as a whistleblower. He decided that the Pentagon was withholding critical information on this subject from Congress, which he argued was illegal, and he ended up issuing a complaint about this to the Inspector General's Office of the Intelligence Community. On July 26, 2023, just 7 weeks after going public, David Crush and 2 other whistleblowers testified before a congressional hearing. I have taken every step I can to collaborate this evidence over a period of 4 years, while I was with the UAP task force, and do my due diligence on the individuals sharing it. This is because of these steps. I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. During his testimony, Grosh revealed specific details of military UAP encounters. He also stated that despite having nothing to gain by disclosing this information, his testimony made him a target for significant repercussions. Mr. Grosh, have you faced any retaliation or revivals for any of your testimony? Or anything yet? I have to be careful what I say in detail, because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate. Some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. We were told that individuals had been killed protecting this information. He's in fear of his life as well as the safety of his wife. There's something more nefarious at play here. Almost immediately following his dramatic testimony, articles in the press attempted to discredit Rush, making a string of accusations aimed at questioning his mental state. They tried to say that because he had deployed, and some of his friends have died, he might have PTSD. They tried to discredit him, which is just the most egregious smear that they could ever run on a military service member. The article sensationalized his mental difficulties, and it turns out that the author of it actually acknowledged publicly that he had been contacted by sources inside the Defense Department and directed to do this. We have a generations-long history of the federal government trying to discredit witnesses, and I believe we saw that with David Crush. The U.S. military denies David Crush's sensational allegations. But if what he says isn't true, then why did members of the Defense Department actively try to discredit his testimony? The claims made by David Crush and other whistleblowers like him have brought more attention to the UFO phenomenon than ever before. And ancient astronaut theorists believe that the truth about an extraterrestrial presence on Earth may finally be revealed. Washington, D.C., July 13, 2023. After more than 70 years of whistleblower testimony claiming that the U.S. government is covering up the truth about UFOs, members of Congress finally decide to take action. And please, the NDA will include my amendment on increasing transparency on WAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer sponsors the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act. The bill would require the release of all government knowledge of WAPs. But UFO researchers are left frustrated when it is finally signed into law 5 months later. Some really robust and new whistleblower provisions were drafted, but not a lot of that actually made it into the final bill. In fact, a lot of the really interesting UAP-related provisions were negotiated out. No independent review board, no eminent domain provision, no extra whistleblower protections. Were these changes to the legislation simply part of a routine political process? Or might it be the latest attempt by the government to suppress information about UFOs? Either way, many UFO researchers remain optimistic that we've entered an age in which more whistleblowers will come forward than ever before. The fact that Congress gutted this legislation, a lot of people in UFO world see that as the end. It's just the beginning. And I think that what's gonna happen over the next months and years is that additional whistleblowers are gonna go public. And they're gonna release documents. And they're gonna release videos that are gonna be very compelling. Much of the information that we've gotten about UFOs has been from whistleblowers. People who are insiders. They're in the military. And they think that people should know these things. And so they risk themselves by becoming whistleblowers. For the past 8 decades, the heroes of this movement have always been the whistleblowers, the insiders, who decide that the powers that be can't withhold this information from the American people and indeed the human race any longer. They're dedicated ultimately to what all of us are seeking: truth. It is the whistleblowers who will move us one step closer to answering the extraterrestrial question. It's about time that we're being told the truth. Because we can handle the truth. We're told we can't, but we can. And so I think we now live in one of the most exciting times in the entire history of our planet. In the wake of the whistleblower hearing before Congress, could even more incredible secrets soon be revealed? Secrets involving knowledge of a real extraterrestrial presence on Earth. For now, the fact that UFOs are being discussed in the mainstream press, and Congress represents monumental progress. If we ever learn the full truth about UFOs, whistleblowers will undoubtedly have played a key role in getting that truth out. We'll look back at the history of some of these people, and we'll name the names and say, these are the people who enabled this to be done. I see this the Mount Rushmore of ufology. That one day, we'll have those faces carved in stone somewhere. High-Neck Ruppelt, Alessandro Grash, and many others. They're all heroes. What if the incredible claims of UFO whistleblowers are all true? Could it be that first contact with extraterrestrials does not lie in the near future, but has already happened? Perhaps as more whistleblowers continue to come forward, the full truth will finally be revealed, and we will discover that we are not alone, even on our own planet.